Alright, how's it going everyone? It is time for another Master Mentorship video. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of these games. Let's flip this one around. This was a game from Jerome. So here we go. E3, E5, and Queen H5. Yeah, I agree. Doesn't make too much sense, but that's just what people do at this rating level. So let's see how you punish white. Knight C6 I like, just developing and defending that pawn. And then you can play Knight F6 next and kick that queen away. And here white can't even go for their for their scholar's mate here because you just play D5, of course. Their pawn's not on E4 for some reason. So bishop B5. And yeah, the knight's not even pinned, so just Knight F6. Queen F5. Now you can move your D pawn with tempo, I believe. You play A6 first, which I think is okay. You played this move so that if white captured the knight, you could recapture and keep your pawns better connected. And you give this alternative. You mentioned D5. Well, you can't play D5 because then queen takes E5. White doesn't even have to give you the bishop here. They don't have to take on C6. They can take on E5 right away. So I love the annotations, and I love that you said you did calculate this, but don't you lose a pawn by playing A6? White can take your knight and then take on E5. You knew you were down a pawn, but it felt good to get your pieces active faster than white. So okay, are you saying you knew you were losing a pawn when you played pawn to A6? Because if that's the case, I'm okay with it. You do have tons of compensation for a pawn, but you don't have to sack a pawn here. You could have just played D6 and attacked the queen, and now the pawn defends the pawn. And if white takes, I mean, who cares about this situation? I mean, yeah, your pawns are doubled, but you have another pawn closer to the center. The queen's still under attack. This is still much better for black. I don't think you have a big pawn structure concern here. So you didn't have to sacrifice a pawn, but as long as you knew you were sacking a pawn, I'm okay with it. So takes, and bishop e6. Let's see how this goes. Knight f3, bishop d6. Yeah, I like it. Queen c3, and castles. Yeah, black has lots of compensation here for a pawn. Pawn to h4, wow. And yeah, you play queen e7. You said queen d7 was another thought. Yeah, I think they're both reasonable moves to connect rooks. But remember, you sacked a pawn. And you have to come up with some kind of concrete plan here. Like, you can't just, like, let both sides develop all their pieces, because then you're just down a pawn. So what about playing knight d5 and then trying to play for f5, f4 or something? Just trying to open up lines. Remember, we talked about the importance of pawn breaks. And in this position, I think you have to find some kind of... well, maybe you can play without a pawn break. Maybe you can play with pieces alone. It's just going to be kind of hard, I think. That's why I don't really love the pawn sacrifice, even though you have good compensation. I think you could have got an advantage without sacking a pawn, so, you know, why sack the pawn? But okay, queen e7, h5, yeah, this doesn't seem to make too much sense to me. Bishop b4, okay, queen d3, well now you can just bring a rook to the d file, good. Queen e2, h6, stopping h6 is, I think that's reasonable. And you still have this big lead in development, but let's see what you do with it. So white plays c3. Okay, this does hit your bishop. You notice all of white's pawns are on dark squares. How does he plan on developing his bishop? Well, he can play d4 next. You don't have any central presence. So it doesn't really... I mean, white's pawns aren't fixed on dark squares. I mean, he can still move them. So bishop c5. You want to avoid the hit, but you didn't want to play bishop d6. Okay, b4, bishop a7. Now just d4 locks your bishop out, though, right? Like, that's the problem with this pawn sacrifice. White has two central pawns, and you have none. So that's why I was worried. Like, if you don't do something fast, you can't just, like, develop casually and then see what happens. Because in the long term, white has the advantage, even with their horrible development. If they just control the center, and there's no tactics you find, and they end up finishing development, 10 moves from now, they're just up a pawn. So I guess let's see how this goes. Bishop a3, b5. Okay, you did this so the b pawn wouldn't be able to move forward and limit the squares of the white bishop. I feel like white can just play d4 if they want to limit your bishop, though, so I don't really see the merit to this too much. And this also really weakens your pawn structure, I think. I think now white should just be playing for, like, the a4 break. You gave them a pretty easy pawn break to play here. They could just bring this bishop somewhere else and play a4 and try to open this rook on the file. And this structure becomes a lot weaker when the b pawn is pushed. The b7 pawn kind of holds together the whole structure, right? After b5, the double pawns are a lot weaker. Maybe it's not a concern right away, but let's just see how the game goes. So yeah, knight e5, white goes after that pawn right away. Queen to d6, okay, it's reasonable. Pawn to f4, okay, and knight e4. White gives you this temporary central hole, and you saw the potential threat of coming to g3. Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I think f4 is just a big blunder, because now g3 is super weak, d2 could be a target. White should have just played d4, and I think white might have even been better, despite their lack of development. Although maybe they had to worry about bishop c4 in some cases, although the knight's still on e5, I don't know. But yeah, this doesn't look right. I think black's better once again. So d4 and knight g3. Okay, yeah, and you just win a rook, right? It's not even the exchange. You win the full rook unless your knight gets trapped. Queen h4. Okay, the knight does get trapped. But you're still up material. So rook e8, I don't mind. I guess the idea is going to be to play f6 and then, get some activity on the semi-open e-file like you said. It looks like that's what happened. So queen takes h1, f6. And yeah, you're up the exchange for a pawn, so you have a small material advantage. You want to kick the knight off the e-file, make it easier to clear everything off and hit white's e-pawn. Okay. Are you being concrete, though? Like, I still feel like there's not too much concreteness here. Like, were you calculating specific lines and how white could defend the e-pawn, or was it just kind of an idea? But let's see. So knight g6, bishop d5. Okay, targeting the e-pawn. Makes sense. Queen h3, and maybe you're going to double on this file. So rook e4. And yeah, this is how I kind of know you're not really calculating at all. You have all these general thoughts, which are good. You say you want to take the square and double on the e-file, but you're not looking for what your opponent's going to do, because knight d2 is super obvious. I don't feel like there's been really any evidence of much concreteness in any of these annotations. I love the annotations, by the way. They're great. They're really helping me, get a feel for how you're thinking. But I see very little calculation in any of this. It's all a bunch of ideas. You play b5 because you want the bishop locked out. Okay, what's white's candidate moves in response? How's white going to react to that? Do you see the potential pawn breaks? Do you look for the a4 idea? I feel like you're just playing moves because they follow like these ideas you have. But okay, knight d2, rook e6, castle long. Okay, rook e8, rook e1, and pawn to a5. Okay, white can't capture the pawn because the bishop's unprotected. And you've thought about pushing to a4 later to further cramp white. Well, you'd kind of like to open lines on the queen side if you could, right? That's where white's king is. Usually when there's opposite castling, you don't want to lock up the queen side. I was thinking that your plan might be to play a takes b4, and now if bishop takes, you can play c5 and try to blow open the whole queen side. And if pawn takes, the pawn's a long-term target, and then the bishop's still blunted. So I thought you should be playing to open the queen side, not play a4. Anyway, white plays king b2, and here you went into a deep think. Okay, you see that white's bishop has 0 liberties, and also that if either the white c-pawn or e-pawn can be deflected, some sacrifices could occur. And you see this bishop takes d4 idea. And yeah, that works. Very nice. Now, there's some concreteness. That's perfect. Awesome. Very good job at looking for candidate moves. And those kind of stemmed from your general ideas. I think it still stemmed from like this general perception of the bishop has no squares and all this stuff. Did you calculate what happens if white plays the in-between move, though? B takes a5. I guess then you could just, if nothing else, you could just come back. And certainly the d-pawn is more valuable than your a-pawn. But good job. You really spent 5 or 6 minutes on this turn, and you saw all these variations. That's awesome. Yeah, so e takes d4, and you saw the line with c takes d4, a takes b4. Yeah, of course, this is winning for you. You even calculated f5. Good job. Really looking for all of white's candidate moves here. But then, yeah, rook takes e3 is simple enough. Okay, e takes d4, rook takes e1, and white can take on e5, but it's not really that important now. Okay, queens come off. And what's the material balance here? You're up 2 exchanges for a pawn. Interesting. Yeah, should be totally winning for black, especially because your rooks are so well coordinated. Knight f8. Yeah, rook e2, king c2, good, and the game's over. Awesome, nice job. I think the biggest thing is to keep working on your concreteness. I think there were some moments there where you got too caught up in your plans and kind of stopped calculating. But when it really mattered, you did the calculation. You sat there for 6 minutes, you put the work in, and you found the winning blow. So that's awesome. I just hope my thoughts also on the opening kind of helped there. You have to be careful sacking a pawn. You can't just say, I have this lead in development, and then not do too much with it. Because I think white could have consolidated that extra pawn if they played well. But nice win. Did you not lose any games this week? I'm just wondering why you chose this one to send me. But nice job. Keep playing. Hopefully, you find someone who can beat you next week so I can take a look and see what went wrong. Next up, you've got a game here from Seth. Welcome to the Master Mentorship family, Seth. Looking forward to taking a look here. Let's flip this around and take a look. E4, D6. Okay, and you're always playing this against E4 now. Yeah, we can talk about opening preparation later. You said it's not very optimal. I mean, you can play it, but I don't think there's anything wrong with it. White goes ahead and plays knight f3. Yeah, kind of a bit odd, but you can go ahead with knight f6, bishop c4, and, okay, and you just don't take their hanging e-pawn. And you mentioned that to me in an email, I believe, and you said there were no games here in a database. Was that this position where you said that? That no one played bishop c4 here? I think so, yeah. So I think, again, it's an issue of concreteness. I know I harp on it a lot, and we talk about it in Module 2. You can't ever just play on autopilot. I don't care if it's like your opening preparation. I don't care what it is. Unless you've seen the exact position before, you always have to be identifying all your checks, captures, and threats. So this has to be a candidate move. It's a check, capture, or threat. So make sure you're going through this process every turn. H6 I don't like at all. It feels kind of like a waste of time in the opening. Even if there was no knight takes e4, you don't play h6 here. I really like the annotation, by the way. You said a lot of people have trouble against knight g5, and there's a lot of mistakes you can make there. Okay, so don't make a mistake now just because you're afraid of making a mistake later, right? If you're afraid of knight g5, you can't just, like, knee-jerk reaction play h6. You have to calculate. You have to say, okay, what's the move I want to play here? And the answer is g6, probably. So you have to say, okay, if I play g6, if white plays knight g5, is that really a concern? And I think the answer is no. I think you could play, if nothing else, just pawn to e6. When your pawn's not on e5, these ideas don't usually work. This is not an e4, e5 opening. So you really got to be concrete. But okay, h6, knight c3, knight b to d7, d4, e5, and now we're back to kind of a normal Philidor defense, except that black has played pawn to h6, d5, and c6. And yeah, I kind of agree with you that d takes c6 doesn't make too much sense. That just helps you bring another pawn closer to the center. That move's usually only good if white can generate significant pressure against this backwards d-pawn, but I don't think they really can. In fact, they have to watch out for you just playing d5 at some point. Probably not too soon because you have to finish development, but I like your kind of central superiority here in terms of your pawns. Castle, bishop e7, h3, this is something you wanted to see because you know I can play for the kingside attack with this pawn out of position. I'm not too sure what you mean by that, unless you're planning to play like g5, h5, g4. Sure, this pawn can be kind of a hook for your attack. That's hardly ever black's plan here in the Philidor defense, though, so I'm not too sure what you mean. Maybe there's some bishop takes h3 sacrifices later, but I wouldn't say h3 is like bad for white because it's out of position. I think it's a pretty normal opening move. So I'm not too sure what you're talking about here. Let's see what happens. Queen c7, bishop d2, knight f8. I think that's a little too fancy for my liking. Get castled. Right, I mean, your king's definitely going to the king side. There's no way you're castling long in this position. Your king side's way safer. So why not castle first? Maybe there's some logic to playing knight f8, knight g6 before castling. I think you might save a tempo there. I'm just a little nervous with your idea about this kingside attack if you're going to do something crazy here on the king side. Maybe knight f8's okay, though. I think you also want to reserve the right for this knight to come to b6 in some cases, though, because then you can really try to push d5 and take over the center. That's kind of your biggest advantage in this position, this central mass of pawns you have. So I wonder if you consider doing that. You'll give it without comment, too. So not too sure what the idea is. Try to give comments if you can. b3, didn't understand it at all. Me neither. Doesn't make any sense. Whoa, g5. Okay, this is kind of double-edged, right? And how can you play this move without comment? That's kind of, I mean, it's a very committal move. It's a very interesting move. I'm not saying it's bad, but surely you can't give it without comment. You have to tell me, what you're considering there, because there's very clear pros and very clear cons of playing a move like this, right? My question is, where's your king going? Because I don't really see a safe haven for the king anymore. Maybe that's okay. Maybe your attack's going to count for more over here on the king side, but you still have to really heavily weigh this before you play it. So bishop e3, knight g6, queen d2, g4. Okay. I think too much is happening here for you to just give no comments. I'm not sure why there's no comments for these moves, but okay. Takes, knight takes, kind of like bishop takes, just getting another piece into the game, right? And you do give a comment about this. You mentioned that you wanted to defend the h6 pawn, and that's why you played knight takes. Well, I think if you play bishop takes and they take on h6, I mean, if your idea is this all-out kingside attack, you want them to take the h6 pawn, right? That's good for you. Now your rook's active in the attack. So I'm not sure why you'd be worried about losing that pawn. I think here you probably just maybe castle long. I know it's risky, but now you really do have an attack, now the h-file's open. So I don't think you have to defend h6. It's more important to get your last piece in the game. Knight takes g4, knight h2, okay, h5, f3. That looks pretty weakening. Takes, h4, knight g4, knight f4, good. King f2, and you said you missed bishop g5 until looking at this now. Probably bad that you thought the king move had to be terrible, but you didn't spend much time figuring out why. So I'm still not really seeing much calculation here. I think this is something everyone is kind of struggling with in this program, which is expected. I mean, it's something so many chess players struggle with at pretty much all rating levels, up to expert master. I mean, even I still have struggles with this sometimes, just being concrete. But so many players only talk about their general plans, and they don't really see much move-to-move calculation. Really, you can't play any move in chess without calculating, pretty much ever. h3. Okay, so after missing this good move, you still felt good about just pushing the pawn, trying to win. So again, were you looking for your opponent's candidate moves in response? Were you calculating out any long lines here? Or did you just feel like the move is good, so you played it? G2, H2, and you left your knight hanging here on purpose because you think that both your opponent and I missed that he could just let me promote because both rooks guard that square. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you're not threatening to promote. So when you make a blunder like this, don't just tell me that it's a blunder, because that's kind of what you did. You just said, I played this because I missed G takes F4. I've talked to this a lot to the players who have been in this program. Never just say, like, I made this move and it's a blunder. Think about why you blundered. Like, why did you miss this? What were you doing? Were you looking for candidate moves? Did you play it in, like, 5 seconds? It's good that you mentioned you left the knight hanging here on purpose. So you saw the knight was attacked, and then what happened? What happened after that? I want to know the whole thought process of what happened, not just, I missed it. And you really have to be thinking about that, too, because that's the only way you're going to make sure not to do this again. You really have to be concrete and calculate everything if you're going to sacrifice a piece. Rook h1, bishop e6, okay, and you're still completely slipped your mind. Okay, at least you mentioned that. The knight was hanging even though you thought about it last turn. So, some things to think about. How fast did you play bishop e6? And when you played bishop e6, did you, look for white's candidate moves? Did you say, okay, I want to play bishop e6. That's the move I want to play. And okay, if I play bishop e6, what are all of white's candidate moves? Let's look for every single one of their checks, captures, and threats. Okay, there's queen takes a7. I can dismiss that really fast. There's bishop takes e6. What would I play there? There's g takes f4. What would I play there? Oh no, there's g takes f4. I can't play bishop e6. Do you see how you have to go through this process every single turn? It's not optional. You're not allowed to play any move in chess ever without knowing every single one of your opponent's checks, captures, and threats they could play in response and how you would handle each one. So, okay, bishop e6, takes, okay, and now this is probably just over. Bishop takes e6, yeah, takes. Your passed pawn falls. I'll just see if there's any way you have a chance, but probably not. I'll just see if anything changes. Yeah, blowing open the center, that's not going to help your king. I think you just miscalculated that you're losing a pawn here, too. And this should be lost. Yep, okay. So I think your creativity there on the king side could have paid off. I'm not sure if it's entirely sound, but I don't really care too much. The number one thing I care about is you have to be a lot more concrete than that. Next time you send me a game, I want to see every single turn that you were thinking about your opponent's candidate moves. Every single one, and making sure you have a response to every single one, every move you ever make. That's the number one thing to work on right now, and Module 2 is going to help you out with that. So good job. I really like the annotations, by the way. That was very helpful in kind of diagnosing what's going wrong here. All right, next up, you've got a member versus member game here. We have Warku against John, and this was annotated by John. So let's go ahead and look at this from the black perspective and see what happens. d4, knight f6, c4, g6, knight f3, c5. Is this a line? I'm trying to think about what opening this is. Is this a King's Indian? Is this going to be a Benoni? I guess it's a Benoni. Yeah, sorry, I don't play too much of this myself as black, so I had to think here for a second. But this is a Benoni, right? I guess white could play d5. They could just play knight c3 and kind of stay on this anti-Benoni kind of symmetrical English kind of stuff. But let's see. So e3. So it's kind of a hybrid kind of setup right now, d5. And you said you're unfamiliar with the position. It will require lots of study. Don't worry about that right now. Like, if you're not sure about the position, then you just have to calculate. So I understand you're not familiar, but you played d5 and created double pawn tension. And whenever there's double pawn tension, there's tons to calculate, right? You have to calculate every single turn. C takes d5, d takes c5, and you have to calculate if white doesn't play either of those moves, then against any other move they play, how is d takes c4 going to work, and how is c takes d4 going to work, right? All four captures are in play. And I feel like you didn't do any calculation at all here. I don't see any calculation. All I see is you're not familiar with the opening, so you threw your hands up. That's not good. Again, you don't have to be familiar with the opening. You just have to go through this simple process. Checks, captures, threats every single turn. So knight c3, knight c6, maybe you should consider d takes c5. Of course you should consider d takes c5. You have to always consider all checks, captures, and threats. How is it even a question of should you consider it? I don't see a single variation or calculated line anywhere in your annotations. I really like the longer annotations, by the way. You've gotten a lot better at that. But just like I said for the previous two games, they're still just ideas. They're not calculation. I really like this comment, by the way. You have time to think, but no ideas are coming to your head. Well, stop trying to come up with like this big grand plan and just do the basics right. I don't care if you mess up with your planning as long as every single turn you're looking for candidate moves and calculating. If you're not doing that, then there's no plan that's going to help you. So, okay, were you considering d takes c4? Did you consider c takes d4? Did you consider your standard developing moves, bishop g7 or knight c6? Against bishop g7 or knight c6, did you consider the ramifications of d takes c5 and c takes d5? Every check, capture, or threat, yours and your opponent's has to be considered every single turn. If you're not doing that, there's no plan that's ever going to help you. Knight c6, takes, and takes, and takes. So you lose a pawn, and this has nothing to do with opening preparation while you've just lost a pawn. It's just a tactical blunder because you weren't calculating at all. And there's no opening preparation that's going to help you. And a lot of players do this. They blame their losses. They blame their blunders and miscalculation and just not going through the process right on not understanding the opening. It doesn't matter if you understand the opening or not. You can go through this process. And I don't even feel like you care or even notice that you lost a pawn. You say you have a weak pawn structure and you don't like e6 blocking the bishop. Do you realize you just lost a pawn? I don't know that you do. So I'm seeing no concreteness, no calculation at all. The annotations are a lot better, but you have to be concrete. E6. So what I want you to do, I think this is going to help you more than me looking at this game. The next game you play, I want to see every single turn what all your candidate moves were, okay? And I want to see what you think your opponent would play against every single one, and really go through that process. I want to see it in the annotations. Every turn you have to be showing me lines, not thoughts. The thoughts are good. You can show me thoughts too, but I have to see calculated lines. Let's actually go through an example, just because I think a lot of players aren't quite getting what I'm wanting here. So in this position, e3, you want to play d5. So if you want to play d5, you have to calculate every single option. So what I want you to do is show me, okay, if white played here, d takes c5, here's what I was thinking of doing. If white played here, and so you can make moves that's going to create variations here for you. Show me exactly what you were thinking. You can type, if white played this, here is the line I was planning to go for. And show me exactly what you would plan to play against this move. And if you don't know, then that's the problem. That's what you're doing wrong. You have to know. you have to know before you play your move. And it doesn't have to be a grand, beautiful plan, but you better have an idea of how to not be down a pawn, or else you can't play the move you want to play. You can't play d5 if there's a way you could end up down a pawn against one of white's responses. Does this make sense? Go ahead and, you can let me know in the Facebook group or send me an email if you need more help with this, but I don't really see any effort to calculate in any of your annotations. So I really want to see tons of these variations when you send me games in the future. Show me every single candidate move white could play and what you would plan to play in response. And these have to be things you were thinking during the game. You can't just think of it after the game. During the game, you have to, consider all the candidate moves and come up with the responses. But okay, I can quickly go through the rest of the game. Your position's just really bad, though, and it has nothing to do with opening knowledge. You just totally never calculated anything. Let's just see if anything changes. You're just down a pawn. Your king's stuck in the center. Okay. Still down a pawn. You lost another pawn. So what happened here? Bad move. The pawn falls on b7. So I've told you before, you can't just tell me you missed something. You have to tell me why you missed it. And after rook takes b7, isn't it better to at least try to take on d1? I'm guessing that was your idea, but you don't really mention why it doesn't work or anything. You just go ahead and save the bishop instead, but now you are just down too much material. So all I see here are thoughts. I am trying to free the white bishop. That's a thought. I need to develop the bishop. That's a thought. White is gaining space. That's a thought. I'm blocking off the rook. That's a thought. I'm trying to exchange pieces. That's a thought. Trying to relieve pressure. That's a thought. I finally developed my bishop. That's a thought. I see a bunch of thoughts. I see zero calculation. So a couple takeaways here, John. And by the way, I love the annotations. They're a lot better. I see clearly what's going wrong for you, which is the whole point of the annotations. But now it's time to take this to the next level. So number one, don't even think, please, of blaming this on opening preparation. It has nothing to do with it. Until you start calculating, there's nothing that's ever going to help you. Not opening preparation, not planning, none of it will matter until you start calculating every single turn. So many players love to blame their losses on not knowing the opening when it just has nothing to do with it at all. And secondly, there's not much else I can say. You just have to calculate. Next time you send me a game, I want to see tons of variations. I want to see very concrete, specific lines you're calculating. The thoughts are fine. You can send me the thoughts, but you have to show me all of your opponent's candidate moves and what you would play in response to every single one. And I think that's really going to help you out. Okay, next up we've got a couple games here from Arne. So let's take a look. You've got the white pieces here. I took a look at one of your wins you sent me and then also your loss, because I definitely wanted to prioritize the game you lost so I could give some feedback. So this was a rated correspondence game. Against player rated 1950. Okay, good opponent. Let's see how this goes. And you said you were expecting a serious challenge. d4, knight f6, c4, e5. So black plays the Budapest Gambit. This throws you off. If you take, you can play knight e4, which is annoying. Yeah, it's kind of an opening that, it's kind of playing for traps. It's not really considered a very sound opening for black. But at the same time, there have been players very strong, even, 2,700 plus grandmasters, who have played this kind of as a surprise weapon. So it's not as bad as it looks. It's going to be hard to hold on to your pawn for too long. Whoa, but you can't decline it. No, 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 you can't play bishop g5. You can't let black get away with grabbing the center with an unsafe move and just letting it stand. Whether you know the gambit or not, you can't let black do that. You can't back down like that. I mean, if you take and lose, then fine, you learn something, but this is one of those undeclinable gambits. You can't decline it. But okay, let's see how it goes. Bishop g5, e takes d4, and now you try to sacrifice a pawn with knight f3. I guess your idea is you want to take with the knight so you don't have to bring your queen to the center, which makes sense. You didn't write down your thought, and you can't understand why you played it. Okay, yeah, I mean, if black plays c5, maybe you just have to live with sacrificing a pawn. Maybe you play b4 or something and try to undermine their pawn structure. There's some ideas here. That's why I don't think allowing e takes d4 at all is very reasonable. You just have to take on e5. But okay, bishop c5, knight takes, bishop e7, and you play bishop takes f6. You're afraid of the double attack after queen to e5. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of annoying. The bishop, knight, and b2 are all hit, huh? But did you look for any other ways to deal with this? Like, you'd love to be able to deal with this without playing a move you don't want to play. What about just e3? Just defend the knight. And now there's no queen e5, right? You just have bishop f4. So it's very good you're looking for your opponent's candidate moves. It's great that you identified the queen e5 threat. But don't settle for, like, the first knee-jerk reaction response concession that deals with it. Really look for all of your options. Because now after bishop takes f6 and queen takes f6, I feel like white's just probably worse. I mean, black has the bishop pair, your knight's under attack, you can't really move it because then f2 is under attack. And here you just sacrifice the b2 pawn, so why can't you play e3 though? I think e3 still works. I don't think you really even mentioned the possibility, and you don't give a comment with knight f3, so I'm wondering if you saw that b2 was hanging or what's going on here. But okay, queen takes b2, knight d2, and this seems like the best way to avoid further damage. Okay, knight c6, queen b1. I'm not sure if you want to trade queens when you're already down a pawn, right? I think you would just probably play e3 and keep on developing here. Play e3, bishop e2, castles, and then, I don't know, if black moves the bishop too early, maybe you have rook b1 with some counterplay on the b file. But I feel like trading queens kind of helps black out, because they already won a pawn. They probably just want to consolidate. And plus, okay, there's even this move, bishop d4, but I think here you just take. Knight takes d4, okay, takes. Okay, you help black simplify a bit. And I don't mind the decision to fianchetto here. I feel like the bishop does have a pretty good prospect here on g2. So let's see how this goes. So castles, bishop g2, d6, and okay, black just gives you a pawn back, so that's nice of them. Very good job showing your two candidate moves and showing me your alternative calculation. Very good. Everyone should be doing this, by the way. Perfect example. You said you considered playing e3 first, kicking away the knight, and only then bishop takes b7. But you saw that knight c6 would kind of stop you. You give this other line with knight e6. I don't think that's the critical line. I think here you just go ahead and take on b7, which it looks like is what you mentioned in your calculation. But yeah, bishop takes b7 right away makes sense to me. Rook b8, bishop g2, takes, knight c2. That's not really a threat. King d2, knight d4, e3, good. Knight c3, bishop a6. Yeah, this pawn's kind of a big target. That is kind of a concern. You have this isolated pawn. And you played bishop d5. Yeah, you don't want to drop that pawn. I'm just worried black can kind of build on the pressure here with like rook b8 and rook b4. So he does play rook b8. You play rook b1. Good. Okay, takes. And yeah, I think white's holding their own here. I think it should probably be a draw, but there's still a lot of chess to be played. You never know what's going to happen. So king f8, knight c3. Yeah, you want to bring it to a more centralized square. I think black is still clearly better because your c4 pawn is really the only significant feature of the position. It's the only clear target. I wonder if black has ideas to bring their knight to maybe b6. It's kind of hard to see how it gets there. Maybe knight c5, d7, b6. I wonder if black was considering these things, or if you were considering these things. You've also considered f4. Before doing that, you want to bring your knight closer to the center. Okay. c6. So this doesn't make too much sense to me. Why is black willing to trade off a totally solid pawn for your very weak pawn? That's something so few players are really thinking about, I guess, at this rating level. So I think black really helped you out with c6 here. So c6, takes, bishop b5, and they just stumble right into a fork. So I think black just didn't calculate at all, and you really exploited it. Very good job. And, suddenly you're up a pawn. Once again, we see the danger of not being concrete. I think black was just kind of stumbling along, playing moves based on general ideas, and that's the logical conclusion of them doing that. So let's see how you convert this. King e7. Yeah, so you have this 4-on-3 majority here on the king side. Hopefully you noticed that. Yeah, good. You want to push the pawns on the king side. So let's see how this went for you. f3, good. Trying to restrict your opponent's counterplay. King king e6, e4, f5. That only helps you, I think. Yeah, you can play e5 if that's safe. Now you have a passed pawn, as long as you can follow up with f4. So I wonder if you calculated here what happens on like g5, though. That would be my only concern before playing e5. Can black stop me from playing f4? But I don't think they can. I think here we just play it anyways. And yeah, I think we're just winning now. So king d5. Oh, you had to calculate that too. Hopefully you had a response ready for that. But yeah, knight d7, f4. And now you have a winning protected passed pawn. So now your goal should just be to trade knights if you can. And if not, just keep improving your pieces. I mean, knight d6 could be an idea, trying to infiltrate. So let's see how this goes. King e4. Well, now e6, right? Knight d6 check. Oh, okay, that works too. King d4. You want to bring your king closer. I mean, knight takes f5 looks very tempting, just winning a pawn and threatening another. I think I would rather play knight takes f5 or e6 than king d4. But okay, king d4, king g2, okay, e6, king e5. Okay, does this work? You have to be careful here because now, okay, f5. That's the idea, and this wins. Good. Yeah, as long as you calculated that concretely, I'm fine with it. I think there might have been some cleaner wins, but as long as you calculated out the win, we're fine. Very good job. You were down a pawn, and you went back to being up a pawn just by being concrete, not giving in, and you fought back. Good win. And then you had this other game. You said you lost this by kind of a one-move blunder at the end game. Played on a Friday night, representative of how you play when you're not 100% focused. Yeah, understandable. It happens. Good to kind of build up that skill too, because in the 5th round of a long weekend tournament, when you start playing in real life, you definitely have to play when you're tired. Let's see how it goes. You've got the white pieces. So we get a QGA, Queen's Gambit accepted, E3, the ambitious alternative you should play. No, there's nothing wrong with E3. There's just different lines. I wouldn't say E4 is a better line at all. I mean, against E4, the problem is E5. You have to worry about this move. Black's just kind of sacrificing another pawn just to mess up white's development. Now, if you take on c4, of course, d4 is hanging, and if you take on e5, you can't, the queens come off. It's just another line. There's nothing wrong with the more conservative e3 here. And now black plays bishop e6. I feel like I've seen this before, but I'm not sure if it's theory. Yeah, this has been played several times. It's actually black's best scoring move, of course, with a very small sample size. But it's an interesting idea, just trying to hold on to this c4 pawn, even at the cost of kind of blocking normal development. So here I'm not sure about knight c3. Just to me, the most intuitive move seems to be knight a3. Just threatening the pawn and stopping b5. I know that's kind of not a very normal move if you're not used to looking for it, but black just played bishop e6. You definitely have permission to play some unusual moves of yourself. You're not going to fall behind in development here. Not with the bishop blocking in the e-pawn. I'm actually curious if that is the main move. Let's see. Okay, it has been played. It looks like more players are preferring knight f3, just staying flexible for the time being. But knight c3, okay, knight c3 has been played a couple times. The only concern here is that black can play c6 and b5, and it might be hard to pick up your pawn back. But just like usual in the Queen's Gambit, you can get some pretty good compensation, even if black holds onto the pawn. You're just going to get a lot of central space. So let's see how the game goes. Black does play c6, and I don't like b3. I mean, this pawn's a very big weakness. I feel like you're doing the same thing black did in the last game. Why are you trading off one of your healthy pawns for black's very vulnerable c4 pawn? Now, there are some lines where you do this in the Queen's Gambit accepted, when you get this pressure down the A file, or you get some pressure by opening up the queen side. I feel like you don't have enough here to justify this. I'd rather keep this weak pawn on the board and just keep developing. But okay, let's see how it goes. Okay, good. You mentioned some alternatives. Knight f3 makes sense. A4 makes sense. I think you can probably get the pawn back if you want it. It's just a question of, at what cost. But okay, you played b3 instead. So now c takes b3, a takes b3. You definitely have compensation for a pawn. You're down a pawn for good, but, the bishop's on e6, your rook's open. Let's see how this goes. Knight f6, bishop d3, queen b6, rook b1, and you considered knight a4, but you thought it was an empty threat. Do you want your knight on a4? Unlikely. Stockfish thinks it's the best move. I don't mind the knight on a4 here because you can bring it to c5. The bishop can't control that square because there's a bishop on e6. But you have to find the tactical justification, too. The whole point is you can't, or black can't play queen takes b3 because now you have takes, and knight b6. I'm not sure if you considered this, but this is why knight a4 is a good move here, because it tactically defends your b3 pawn. That's the main purpose, without having to bring your rook to a passive square like b1. But okay, knight b to d7, knight f3, knight d5. I don't love knight takes d5 because you're just kind of helping black get this bishop to a better square, right? Or they could play c takes d5, and now they control the center a lot better. So I don't really see too much upside to playing this. I'd rather play, knight a4 you mentioned, maybe even bishop d2. I just don't really like helping them out by taking on d5. So bishop takes d5, and knight d2. Yeah, you're right. Not being concrete enough. You don't want the bishop to take and take back to g2 since it ruins your king side. But you leave the g-pawn hanging. Terrible play. But it seems like black missed it. They don't take on g2. But you're right. Good job criticizing yourself, though. That's very important. I'm not really entirely sure what the idea even is of knight d2, aside from the fact that it's a tactical blunder. But okay, black lets you get away with it. So e5, you go ahead and get castled. Yeah, you don't want to take on e5 since the g-pawn's still hanging. Good job kind of admitting the mistake, yeah. Because if black takes the pawn, at least you have maybe some checks on the e-file if they take back with the queen before their king gets to safety. So let's see how the game goes. Bishop d6. Okay, black has no interest in winning your pawn. Knight c4. Okay, takes. That seems to help you out quite a bit. Not sure if that was black's best course of action. Queen c7, rook e1. Okay, your reasoning is if e takes d4, you have a discovered check on the king. But black doesn't have to play e takes d4. I feel like that's kind of the wishful thinking I talk about, where your move only makes sense if black does something that doesn't make sense. Now, maybe you want to discourage e takes d4 because you're afraid of some threats with like bishop takes h2. So I kind of get it. You mentioned queen g4. I think that's an interesting alternative. You do mention they can play g6, but g6 is kind of a concession. That would weaken the dark squares a little bit. Hopefully your bishop can get open someday and maybe make use of that. So I think it would be a reasonable approach. You really have to watch out for the idea to take on h2. So in light of that, I really don't mind rook e1 that much. I'm even wondering if there's ideas to follow up with f4 in some cases if black doesn't castle now. Because black has trouble opening this file, don't they? And they can't really push e4, and you have a double threat on e5. So that could be interesting, but I think black should just go ahead and castle. So they castle. And you push c5. Good job showing your calculation here. You calculated c5, bishop e7, bishop f5. Not sure why bishop f5. That move doesn't seem to do anything. Bishop f5, knight f6. Oh, I see. You want to remove the defender here and try to take on e5. But that doesn't work, does it? Because the queen still controls e5, right? You figured it would be better than d takes 5 straight away, but you didn't consider many other alternatives. So c5, bishop e7. I think c5's fine because you want to stop any of these ideas of taking on h2. But I'm not sure why bishop f5. Knight f6, and you take... So what's the idea? Why is that good? Oh, I see, because b7 falls. And black really has no way out of this? Let's see, bishop f5. What if they just, I don't know, defend the knight with the rook? Play rook fd8. Now you can't take on e5 at all because of the pins down the d file. But I guess in this specific case, knight f6 takes. I guess you do win the b pawn. You're not going to stay up material, though, I don't think, because c5 is so weak. D takes e5 is just such an anti-positional move, really weakening your c-pawn. But yeah, too little calculation. You missed bishop takes c5 and solve this problem. Yeah. Kind of important when you build this pawn chain to always think about the ramifications of breaking it, of course. But it sounds like kind of a stopped too soon category of mistake. But that's okay. That's way better than not calculating it at all. I love the concreteness of bishop f5, even though it doesn't really work. It's way better that you're thinking of these concrete moves than just kind of playing on general principles. So knight f6, takes, and takes. Okay. Queen c2, defending your bishop and threatening his bishop. To be fair, c6 is kind of a target now too, so maybe you benefited somewhat from this. Plus bishop b2 is coming. I feel like white's better. Although, wait, black's still up a pawn, aren't they? That said, I still think white might be better. I mean, bishop b2 looks pretty scary. Look at how good all your pieces are after bishop b2. There's going to be threats of taking on f6 and then taking on h7. c6 could fall. This rook is super active. Black's rooks are very passive. I think white has more than enough for the pawn. So bishop b6, bishop b2, queen a5. And now aren't you just winning? You just take on f6 and take on h7, right? Unless I'm missing something. I guess your rook is hit. But, well, first of all, we can just play rook a1. Yeah, okay, rook a1, good. Queen d5. And now we can go for this, right? Look at all your pieces here. They're amazing. All of black's are bad. And now, finally, you have a tactic to finish them off. You just have bishop takes f6 and taking on h7. And black's only shelter for the king is 2 doubled isolated pawns. Plus, you win your pawn back. So you played e4, and you said in hindsight, bishop takes f6 would have been much better. So it's not just like a judgment thing. Like, this is a kind of a tactical point. It wins a pawn, right? So, like I've said to other people, when you say, another move was better, you have to think about why did I miss it, right? What happened that made you not play bishop takes f6? Did you not see you were winning a pawn? Or did you see you were winning a pawn with bishop takes h7, but you just thought that e4 was better? Because those are two different kind of misjudgments, right? If you saw you were winning a pawn, but you thought e4 was better, I mean, I guess I'm okay with that. But if you don't see you were winning a pawn at all, it's just a simple two-move combination, right? And if you're looking for all your checks, captures, and threats, I think it's pretty hard to miss bishop takes f6 followed by bishop takes h7. But okay, let's see how the game goes. e4, queen c5, and yeah, now you kind of have to trade queens, don't you? I mean, f2 could be a target, and you kind of cut off all your pressure here against h7, unfortunately. So queen takes c5, bishop takes e5. And okay, I love the note here. You said during your post-game analysis, you don't understand why you didn't want to take the knight. So that's kind of your answer to my question. You don't really know why you never took the knight. And you kind of attribute it to a lack of concreteness. You said you don't really know what to do, so you just wanted to push the pawn hoping to queen it. Is that what you said, hoping to queen it? Well, it's not a passed pawn. There's a pawn on f7, so this pawn's not a passed pawn. Maybe you mean hoping to turn your kingside majority into a queen. I guess you do have a 4-on-3 here, but you need the f-pawn's help, and that's going to be a long-term plan. So I think it was just kind of a misjudgment, and you really missed your chance to get a winning position with bishop takes f6 and bishop takes h7. So, okay, knight d5, rook c1, bishop b6. Well, you win the c6 pawn back. Knight c7, that's not good for black. Yeah, you're more than happy to go for this. Good. Yeah, the two bishops are going to be better than a rook in this position. g6, bishop d3, a5. You got to watch out for that pawn a little bit, but I think you're going to get so much pressure here on the black king. I just want to play bishop c4 and e6, I think, if black's going to let me, unless there's some reason I can't do that. Hopefully you calculated that. And you said you were mostly fearing moves like rook b8. So yeah, bishop c4. I mean, you have to calculate that. That's very good that you're identifying your opponent's candidate moves. There might be some back rank trouble there, so maybe you do have to do something else. Maybe flipping the move order like you mentioned. I see that you mentioned playing e6 first, and the idea is f takes e6. Yeah, now you just have to check, and that's just a win, right? And if black doesn't take, maybe then you play bishop c4 and build up the pressure. Or you just take on f7, and black has no answer, right? So black would have to play something like maybe f6 here. You mentioned rook b8, but now you take with tempo, and I don't think that's going to be good for black. I guess they could hope here that you don't have time for bishop c4 because your bishop's hit. But you give the line here, it's going to work out well for you because you're going to lose the bishop but win a rook. And that's more than enough to be happy. And you have time to solve your back rank problem. Yeah. So I think you're right. I think you just weren't kind of concrete enough. But that's okay. I think you're putting in a lot of effort here in your calculation. You're just kind of messing it up a little bit sometimes, but that's okay. You're making a lot of progress with it. But you play g3 because back rank issues were the only thing on your mind. But now black plays a4, and I think you have another chance to go for this now. So I think e6 would have still been very strong. Bishop a3. Okay, but now, yeah, now you give black a chance to neutralize that open file, which they probably should have done last turn, by the way. Now it's not as great for you because you don't have a rook at all. Usually in these rook and two minors versus two rooks positions, the player with the two rooks likes to trade a set of rooks because now you have no rook at all, and you can't do certain things without a rook on the board. And here you just make a one-move blunder. You fall for rook c3. Yeah, that's unfortunate. And I think the game's over from here. Yeah, well, yeah, black has a rook and you don't. So that was a hard-fought game. You're definitely moving in the right direction. You're hanging in there against some good players. Just keep it up. Okay, next up you've got a game here from Brian, and this is a game that Brian played against me. So let's take a look. I'll have a good insight into what was going on here. So I had the black pieces, you had the white pieces. e4, I went ahead and played the Sicilian. c3, yeah, you like the Alapin, that's fine. Knight f6. But this isn't the normal Alapin move to play pawns at e4, right? And the Alapin, against knight f6, you have to play e5. So I feel like this is another part. Yeah, good. You mentioned it. Yeah, unfortunately we're on autopilot. You caught yourself. Perfect. This is good, by the way. Everyone should be doing this. When you make a mistake, really try to figure out what was going on after the game and tell me. Don't just tell me, d4 is a mistake because of knight takes e4. So, you know what happened. You played on autopilot, you didn't look at the board, and you missed knight takes e4. That's okay. Just make sure it doesn't happen again. Again, can't be on autopilot. Have to always look for checks, captures, and threats. Knight takes e4, knight h3. That was a move I thought was very strange when you played it during the game. I think I asked in the chat box why you played it, and I didn't get an answer for a while. You want to protect f2. Well, I can't threaten f2. What piece do I have that can help me attack f2? Again, that's kind of like the seeing ghosts kind of category. You're afraid of something that doesn't exist, so you play a suboptimal move. Just like why people play h6 or a6 in the opening. You're afraid of something that's not real right now. It's better just to keep on developing. So I played d5, queen f3, and yeah, you mentioned your eye in f7, but you're never going to be able to target f7, I don't think. Knight c6, bishop b5, e6, castles, bishop b7, knight d2, you want to kick the knight away. I bring it back to f6 just to make sure there's no potential tactics here on f7. Knight b3, pressuring c5 and adding some protection to d4, takes. Not sure if you should have taken with the knight. Well, if you take with the knight, you have to watch out for this, right? And now you have to trade bishops. And, I mean, white's just lost, right? White's down a pawn. You have an isolated pawn. I'm just going to develop. And black's better in pretty much every way, and black has an extra pawn. I think once you lose the pawn, it's very hard to come back. That's kind of the nature of chess. But I think knight b3 is okay, and then taking with the pawn is okay. You just got to kind of hang in there and hope that I mess up and just be ready to exploit it. Bishop e7, queen g3. This was a good move. Very, very good move. This is how you complicate the game when you're in a lost position, because now I have to think. I remember being kind of upset when I saw this move, and I thought, oh man, now I have to think. I can't just, castle and play on autopilot. Because now, of course, if I castle, I had to watch out for bishop h6. And looking back now, I'm not sure why I didn't go for this, because I think I just play knight e8, and everything's fine. I'm just going to play king h8, your bishop has to give away, and black has successfully consolidated. Plus, this knight can hop to d6 and maybe c4. Black has a winning position. But for some reason, you've scared me, which that's exactly what you're trying to do. That's perfect. And instead, I went for this more complex line, just trying to make sure that I don't end up in any kind of kingside attack. So I played knight e4, sacrificing a pawn kind of in return, at least temporarily, because the idea is bishop f6, and I have tons of pressure on d4. But now I can't castle short. And that's a huge accomplishment for you, because now I can't just castle and safely consolidate and grind out my extra pawn. There's always going to be chances to go after my king as long as queens remain on the board. So very good job fighting back. You played queen g4. Yeah, looking back, you believe h6 might have been a better move. Yeah, probably. But queen g4, I took on d4, you take on d7, takes, and takes. Yeah, this is kind of the position I saw, either with the queen on h6 or on g4. When I went for this idea, so I win my pawn back. I trade off your central pawn for my g-pawn, which in some ways helps me, especially in the endgame. But in the middle game, there's still this question of where's my king going. That said, my pieces are pretty active, and it's hard to see how white can attack. So you played queen to d1, you want to kick out the bishop. You considered bishop to e3 offering an exchange, but you would have had your b2 pawn hanging. Okay, but is it really worth just going back to d1 just to make my bishop retreat? Maybe it is. Maybe it is. I played bishop g7. I guess you're afraid of the f2 pawn in some cases. f3, that seems kind of weakening of your king, but I understand you want to get rid of the knight. Knight d6, rook b1, moving to get out of the x-ray. Makes sense to me. Knight f5, queen e1, castles, b3. Okay, yeah, you want the bishop in the game. Rook a to c8. And now this is the move that I thought was a bit too much, to play g4. And you give it with no comment, which is kind of not what I had hoped. This is definitely a very significant decision, because now, I mean, you have to watch out for your king a lot more after something like rook c2. The f-pawn becomes very weak. So I played knight d4, bishop b2, trying to exchange the bishop for the knight. But now rook c2, and now white just is dead lost. Your king is way too weak now with the pawn on g4. There's all kinds of threats. Rook f2, rook fc8, all my pieces are very strong. This is where the wheels fall off, but I already think there's no good solution. Like, you can't take on d4 because you walk right into this pin. I think it's very hard to find a good move here for white, and I don't think you really found one after the game either. You mentioned that rook takes c2 was no good, but you don't really give an alternative. I would have liked to see, kind of in your after-game notes, what you would play here instead if you could do it all over again. Because if you're going to say rook takes c2 is the mistake, then you got to say, what you would play instead. But yeah, here I had to think. I thought, okay, I could just take and maintain my total domination of the position, or I could play this line with knight takes f3 and win the queen. So knight takes f3, king f1, and I did some calculation here and justified it, so rook takes c2. That was kind of my point. If I take the queen right away, I was a little worried about this kind of position. Or sorry, not king takes right away, because then I take on b2 and then have queen c1 winning the rook. Trading here first, and then winning the knight. And now, I mean, okay, it's still totally winning for me, let's be honest. Here I even have, have queen c3. I just thought rook takes c2 was an even cleaner win, because your queen can't really escape, and I'm still threatening the bishop, still threatening the pawn. I think I kind of had my choice of wins here. There's not much white can do. Queen f2, of course, is horrible, but there's nothing much else you can do. So I think the game's just over. I don't really see a defense. And yeah, after queen f2, I don't even take the queen right away, because I saw queen b5 was even stronger. The king has no squares. I guess it has g2, but now I get to take with check. And take, and check, and fork, and the game's over. Yeah, unfortunately, I think there wasn't too much you could have done after blundering the pawn in the opening. That's how it works at higher rating levels, right? If you blunder a pawn in the opening to a master, you don't really have much to do besides just, hang in there as best as you can. And you did. You made me think. You played queen g3, but I solved all the problems, and there wasn't much you were going to do to stop me from winning. after blundering the e-pawn on move 3. But nice job making me think. I enjoyed the game. Next up, we've got a game here from Raleigh. And Raleigh, I want to name you our most improved player of the week by far. I've been super impressed by your change in attitude this week. You're not as pessimistic anymore. In your correspondence game against me, you're playing much better. You're perfect so far at the time of me making this video. Looking for candidate moves every chance you get. So very good job. I hope this continues with this game I'm about to see. And I saw you won the game, so that's good too. D4, D6. Okay, you've been playing this Austrian Park defense, knight C3, C6, and F4, Queen A5. Yeah, attacking the E4 pawn. Not the most mainstream opening, but that's fine. I don't care about that too much right now. I think you're still playing fine. So bishop D3, and then pawn to E5. And I think this is all still theory. I think I play this line for white. If black goes into this, yeah, this has still been played many times. So I think the point is if white takes twice on E5, I think you take back and you end up with this isolated e-pawn for white you can try to target, even though white kind of gets this lead in development. Or there might be some idea to play knight g4 in some cases. You have to make sure you understand this very well if you're going to play this. I'm actually curious to check. So takes. If white takes, okay, it is knight g4. That's what I thought. Because I thought queen takes e5. That looks way too much you're giving white after knight f3 and e5 and stuff. But okay, knight g4. This is kind of a tricky line to play. I'm not sure if I'd recommend playing this because you have to be very concrete in a lot of these, very ambitious lines. But I think it works out for black okay if you really know what's going on in the opening. But okay, in the game, white just played knight f3, and now you play bishop g4. I'm pretty sure that's the main move in this kind of system, just trying to eliminate this knight to alleviate some of the pressure on your e5 pawn. Good job being free. Yeah, e takes f4 develops the bishop, e takes d4 forces knight takes d4 and cramps your queen. Yeah, I understand bishop g4. Bishop e3, knight b to d7, keep developing, okay. Castles, bishop e7, keep developing, okay. h3, ooh, I don't know if you can play that. I'm pretty sure you have to trade off, because if you play bishop h5, aren't you getting trapped after g4 and f5? Maybe it works because you can meet g4 with e takes f4 and counterattack the bishop, and then you can save your bishop, but you have to see that if you're going to play bishop h5. I feel like you kind of slipped up here a bit. I don't see any calculation when you played bishop h5. I don't see you considering g4. You didn't mention it. Again, you always have to look for your opponent's checks, captures, and threats, and that's definitely a big one. But white let you get away with it. So queen e1. Now you take on f3. Okay, takes, and castle long. And you're thinking you want to push your king side pawns, and the queen side is still safe. Yeah, there might be things to criticize in this opening. I don't want to focus on it too much. I really don't recommend playing it, though. I mean, white gets this big center. I'd rather focus on playing by the opening principles instead of playing this kind of offbeat, surprise weapon kind of opening. But I love that you're calculating better. You're really looking for candidate moves most of the time. You're still slipping up sometimes, but that's okay. That's going to happen. So let's see how the game goes. We kind of have this opposite side castling situation going on. So queen g3, knight h5, good. Yeah, attacking the queen, defending g7, and now you can take on f4 next. And if nothing else, maybe trade off this dark bishop and get rid of white's bishop pair. So queen e1, queen c7. You have to move your queen anyways. So did you consider all your checks, captures, and threats? Okay, you did consider e takes f4. Great. You're considering your moves here. If e takes f4, it opens the center to his two bishops. Well, he's not going to have two bishops if you take on f4, right? Because if he takes, you can trade off that bishop, and you get rid of your knight on the rim for his strong dark bishop. So I think you miscalculated, but that's okay, you're calculating. I'd rather you miscalculate than not calculate at all. That's much better. But okay, you played queen c7, a4, now you take on f4. Okay, you said it's better with the queen on c7. I'm not really sure why. Maybe you want to play d5 at some point after all the exchanges. Takes, bishop f6, opening the e-file and improving the bishop. Okay. d5, check. So why the check? I don't really see you give any notes about why you want to give this check. Queen b6 seems premature. You don't want to open the b-file. Okay, but why bishop d4 check? You don't really mention your reason for this move. I feel like the bishop's kind of vulnerable there. I might just play knight e5. White just kind of gave you this nice outpost here on e5. Again, in Module 3, we kind of talked about the value of these outposts. So I think you can play knight e5, bring a rook to the e-file, try to target the backward z-pawn. I think you have a very reasonable position. This is like night and day compared to how you used to play Raleigh. This is awesome. But okay, you do play bishop d4, king h1, knight e5, bishop e2, queen e7. Don't like the idea of exchanging queens. I would rather bring a rook into the game, I think, because your queen's already developed, right? I think this rook would be a lot better on e8 than it is on h8. But okay, queen e7 takes. Taking with the B pawn doesn't seem right. That really weakens your king. Why not take with the knight, and then you can still play against this pawn. You play b takes to preserve strong knight and keep protecting b5. What does that mean, protecting b5? Not too sure. But okay, b takes, check, king c7. I think your king might be okay here, actually, if you play rook b8. So maybe your king's actually okay. I'm just a bit worried about splitting up the pawns by your king. Let's see, b4. Yeah, white's trying to storm the queen side. But you have lots of pressure here in the center. Rook b8, okay. b5, queen d7, adding strength to the king side. Not too sure what you mean. Again, be concrete, be concrete. I'm not seeing the calculation anymore, Raleigh. I'm not seeing the lines you're really calculating. So what's wrong with just getting this rook in the game? I feel like we should have done that a long time ago. This rook is still not participating. And if you do want to add strength to the king side, then doesn't queen g5 seem more active than queen d7? But okay, I guess we'll see what the idea is. So rook b1, king d8. You can bring your king to the king side. Well, okay, that's one idea. But if that's your idea, then your plan kind of failed, right? If that's what you have to resort to, then something went very wrong. But let's see how this goes. Okay, takes. Yeah, now the knight's super strong. I feel like this is just winning for white now. Their pieces are way too active and your king's on d8. Takes. Yeah, you're right. Simplification favors you. I'm not sure why white would do that. That kind of helps you out because your king's the vulnerable one. Check. Okay, they simplify some more. Ooh, can you... Okay, I guess you can play that. White doesn't really have too good of an infiltration. Although, I would probably want to stop queen a7, right? Why not play queen takes b6? You don't really mention the possibility. So, queen c7... Okay. I guess that works out. Finally, you develop that rook. Okay, you trade some pawns. Okay, and you found a little fork. Okay, and it worked out. Okay, yeah, still some things to iron out. I feel like the whole king running around thing didn't really work out for you. And if that's what it has to come to, then that means b takes c6 doesn't work out so well. And there weren't too many like calculation notes later on in the game here. I feel like you might have got a little tired and stopped being as concrete, kind of resorting more to general thoughts. But that's okay. It's going to take some time before you can do this perfectly every turn. But by and large, this is like 1,000% better than you've played even just 2 weeks ago. So awesome job. Keep it up. You're going to get more consistent over time. Just keep staying positive and force yourself every turn to look for those candidate moves. Awesome job. Okay, next up we've got a game from Ray. How's it going, Ray? Let's flip this around and see how this goes. You had the black pieces here. So knight f3, knight f6. Sure, that's fine. g3, d5. Yeah, nothing much to criticize here. This all looks pretty normal. Knight b to d7. Okay, the knight's better placed here than on c6, you think? Yeah, I don't think you want to play c6 and block in your pawn. You could play c5 and then knight c6, though. So you have a couple options here. But yeah, knight b to d7 seems okay, especially if you just want to play c6 and just really play against this bishop and try to blunt it. Some players like to play like that against this opening. Knight d2, bishop b6. I'd rather put the bishop on e7, I think. Although, it's kind of a tricky thing, right? So in a lot of cases, I think I talked about this in the last video, in a lot of cases when you're black and white plays a fianchetto opening, your bishop on d6 doesn't do too much, and it's actually kind of a liability because white can play e4 later with the threat to play e5. In some cases, right, they have to prepare it. They have to put a rook on e1 or something. But white hasn't taken the center at all here, so you might still be thinking about playing e5 at some point. Then again, you've already committed to playing e6, so I think I might prefer bishop e7. But okay, I'm kind of nitpicking. It's a very small kind of issue. Rook e1, castles, e4. Okay, you have to worry about e5, but you can just take on e4. So takes, and yeah, e5. So we get this very typical pawn structure for the King's Indian attack. Totally symmetrical structure. This bishop's kind of hitting this e4 pawn, but it also helps defend the king, and it's kind of a slow positional maneuvering game. So b3, rook e8, h3, bishop h5, bishop e2, b5. Interesting. Taking away the c4 square from the knight. But did you consider white's possible pawn breaks? So whenever you play a move like b5, you always have to watch out for what happens if white just plays a4. And I think a4 is white's best move here. I'm just wondering if you considered that. But I understand the logic of taking away c4. So let's see. Okay, they play c4 instead. Interesting. Go ahead and play c6. Okay. Rook c1. I wouldn't say you have a backwards pawn. They can't really go after this guy, because if they open the file, the pawn's no longer there. And if they don't open the file, then it's not a backwards pawn. But okay, a6, if he takes, he'll take back, but the problem is the weak c6. Yeah, I'm not sure if this is necessary, because you can already take back. You don't need this a-pawn to take back. I think you should probably just play like queen e7 and keep developing. I don't really see a good reason not to play queen e7. But okay, a6, knight to f1, bishop b4. You want the bishop off the diagonal and attack his rook. Okay, rook e2. And now bishop takes f3. So why bishop takes f3? You said you regretted the move later because there were no more pins. You decided to trade the bishop for the knight. Well, first of all, there's still a pin, right? Just because it's not to the queen. You still have a pin here to the rook. And I don't see the upside to really doing it. Just because there's no more pin, why did you suddenly think that's a good idea? In some cases you play this way. I mean, it's not the end of the world. It's just that I don't really love giving up the bishop pair here. And this bishop seems like a good piece to me. Even e4 could be a target in some cases after bishop g6. And this knight seems very restricted. As long as e5 is defended, you're going to be fine. And you're going to defend it pretty easily with like queen e7, I think. So, not a huge fan, but not the end of the world either. So takes, and now you play knight f8. But the flawed idea of trying to bring the knight to e6 and d4. Why is that a flawed idea? Seems to make sense to me. Why not trade dark bishops and then bring your knight to d4? This is not possible at the moment because it will block the rook, and then e5 will be unpretty. Yeah, but you can fix that, right? You can go defend your e5 pawn with, I don't know, knight d7 or something, and then go for your idea. So I like that you kind of realized that you weren't very concrete when you played it. You do have to be concrete. I think the idea, though, isn't flawed. You just have to do it in the right way. I don't think you've blundered or anything yet, though. I think you're still okay. Bishop a5 I'm a bit skeptical of, though. That's usually not the diagonal the bishop stays on. I kind of want the bishop on this diagonal, with the idea to support the e-pawn, and then get your knight to d4. I see. So you want to play bishop c7. Okay, that makes sense to me, actually. I guess I was a little afraid of some squares becoming weak on this diagonal. Like what if white plays c5 now, and then, I don't know, maybe bring the queen to d6, but it's probably kind of far-fetched. So maybe you're okay here. Okay, b4, bishop c7, rook d2, queen c8, takes. Well, okay. You will win a pawn now and your position starts to crumble. So you can't play c takes b5 because why? I guess rook c2, and then I was just going to calculate what happens on rook c2, knight e6. Oh, then I guess just, yeah, this is a disaster. So I think you just weren't very concrete there, I guess. You didn't realize white could open up that file and cause you a lot of problems there after you bring the queen to c8. I guess maybe queen b8 had to be tried. You thought this would be better than e7, keeping the threat towards h3. Can you actually take on h3? Like, what if after this you just take on h3? I know it looks kind of ridiculous because c6 is going to fall, but maybe then at least you have some counterplay. Although probably not, but at least white has to worry about something. I just feel like, again, you were being kind of general. You played queen c8 because you want to eye h3, but then you don't look at white's candidate moves. Because I think it's pretty obvious that c takes b5 is strong if you really look for white's moves. I just think you didn't really look. Okay, a takes. Yeah, this is not good. You're down a pawn, and white's tripled on this file. Do they not have some tactic here that works? I guess maybe not yet, but they're going to bring that knight to a very strong square. Okay, at least you're kind of shutting them out for the time being. Rook d7, you said it's a bad move. You kind of made a move that only does harm and has no real benefits. You should have resigned here. Why should you resign here? Oh, I guess because probably bishop takes e4. That's probably what went wrong. Yeah, I mean, it's the c-file pressure that kind of decided the game. You kind of just played a move on autopilot, queen c8, and didn't realize what you were walking yourself into. So that's okay. Again, you're doing some things right. You're trying your best to be concrete when you can. I just feel like you have trouble doing it for a whole game. Kind of a similar problem to what we talked about in the last video or two. And that's okay. This is not a quick and easy process. It takes a lot of time to go from understanding how to do this process to being able to always do this process. It takes a lot of effort to build up this kind of muscle memory until it's just impossible to play a move without doing it. That's what it should be eventually, that you can't play a move without doing the calculation and looking for candidate moves. Your brain doesn't work like that anymore. But it takes a long time to get there, so don't feel bad. Just keep trying to do it consciously. Every single turn, really try to challenge yourself to look for all the candidate moves. If it's a correspondence game, it might help to really force yourself to take notes every single turn. Just don't play a move without, writing down all the candidate moves for both sides and how you would reply to each of your opponent's moves. So just keep working on it. And then finally, last but not least, we have a game here from Michael. Nice to see a game from you, Michael. Let's go ahead and take a look here. You have the white pieces, e4, e5. You get a Scotch game, takes. Yeah, that helps you out quite a bit when black does that, because now they can't play knight f6 too easily, they have to worry about e5 in some cases. So they play d6 first, knight c3, knight f6, and bishop d3. And you say it's too passive. I wouldn't really call it passive. You said you usually play for like f4 here and go for, you call it a Yugoslav attack setup, but it's not a Sicilian, so there's no Yugoslav attack. I guess you're talking about just doing this pawn storm on the king side, but that's pretty double-edged. I kind of like finishing development here first. But there's nothing wrong with that idea. You could play like bishop e3 and castle long first, and then depending on what black does, you could play for like f3, g4, and like you said, this kind of Yugoslav attack kind of setup. But okay, bishop d3, it's hard to criticize it. Bishop e7, and you castle short. Okay, c5. Oh, I just talked about this in one of my videos in Module 3. Hopefully some of you have seen it. c5 feels kind of like a one-move attack on the queen, but it really weakens this d6 pawn. Now you can just move the queen away, and you're going to bring a rook to the d5, you're going to play bishop f4, you could even play knight b5 in some cases. This kind of move is really bad for black in the long term, I believe, unless black can play d5. So, okay, queen e3, castle, b3. Trying to find a more active diagonal for the bishop. Well, I think the bishop wants to go to f4 to target this this weakness on d6. Bishop f4 and rook d1. So maybe here, I don't know, maybe just queen back to e2, and then bishop f4. I even wouldn't mind h3 here, just because knight g4 is kind of annoying, bishop g4 is kind of annoying. I wouldn't mind h3 first, and then you can just consolidate with queen e2, bishop f4, rook d1, rook e1 maybe, or doubling on the d file, and then just trying to bring maximum pressure against the d6 pawn. But okay, b3. It's rarely right to fianchetto in a king's pawn opening like this. And black does get to play d5. e5, I don't know about that. It's now d4. I think this is just kind of an oversight. Like we talked about. I think you might be able to avoid losing material, because if they take your knight, you take their knight. But the position might favor them, although they do end up with these doubled pawns on the c-file, right? So I'm kind of curious what your idea here was. So queen e1. Okay, and now they save their knight and force you to save your knight. Okay, knight e4. But you said you didn't see that e5 was hanging during the game. So again, don't just tell me that you didn't see something, right? Really think about why. That's kind of a big, important takeaway that I mentioned to a lot of players in these videos. Because if you just didn't see it, and you're not sure why you didn't see it, then that probably just means you're not looking for your opponent's candidate moves. So that's not great, but that's okay. It's good that we at least identified that. Okay, black plays f5, which is not good. And now why don't you take on Poisson? This seems weakening to me. You still have your light square bishop. You briefly considered e takes f6, I'm guessing you mean, but that allows him to develop his rook. No, it doesn't. I guess maybe it does, because the rook's on an open file, but I think it's worth doing here. Like if we take, I don't know, it just feels natural to me. You have to calculate it. I think you're not going to lose material either way, so you can't just, calculate out the win of material. But to me, this seems much better for you. You mentioned knight takes f6, and you don't have to take on f6, do you? You give that move with no alternative, but you don't have to play it, do you? You could even think about, I was going to say, what if just bishop g5 or something? I think you kind of fell into this trap of I must take on f6 in the middle of your calculated line and didn't really look for any alternative. But even here, after rook takes f6, I don't see that he has more pressure than you do. You could play bishop g5 here, I think, still, or something. I guess you have to watch out for rook e6, though, huh? Although, no, then you have bishop c4. So there's a lot to calculate here. But I think you kind of went more by your general feeling than any concrete calculation, kind of what I've been warning so many players about throughout this whole video. But okay, in the game you decided not to take on Poisson, play knight g3, now comes f4, you play knight h5, and now f3. So if this works for black, this is very dangerous for you, but what happens here if we just take on f3? Okay, good. Okay, you give a line here. So yeah, rook takes f3. Yeah, there's some tactic here with queen e4 that black has to watch out for. And you give some pretty long lines here. I'm wondering, did you do this calculation during the game, or did you do this calculation with the computer, or was this your own calculation after the game? Kind of curious where this comes from. But you mentioned rook f5, which seems to be black's only try here to defend everything. And I guess you can't take the knight right away. Well, can you take the knight right away? Why can't we take the knight? If we take the knight, they don't have, well, I guess they do have rook g5, because the bishop, it's a double attack, isn't it? But the line you give is rook f5, knight g3, that looks pretty promising. g6. Okay, you give all this with no comment. I'm guessing this is some kind of computer line. Takes, and queen e2. Okay, yeah, it looks good to me. And I feel like you just did this based on, again, general principles. You played g3 because you want to keep your pawn structure intact. I don't think you did any calculation. So this just isn't how you make decisions in chess. You don't, see, okay, my two options are g3 and g takes f3. I want to keep my pawn structure intact, so I play g3. No, you can't do that. You have to calculate both moves out as far as you can, evaluate everything you can, and then make a decision. You can't just, go by general principles. But okay, g3, g6, knight f4, bishop g5, check. Bishop e6. You saw that if you could get rid of the white squared bishop and get your knight to f6, then you could win material. That's a long way off, though. Again, that's a very high level, generalistic thought. That's not really any kind of deep calculation. And then, yeah, black just plays bishop takes f4, which you have to consider as a check, capture, or threat, right? So you have to consider it before you ever make a move and make sure you know what you're going to do against it. But you weren't able to. So that's really the number one advice I can give you, just like I gave some other players. You have to be a lot more concrete. Checks, captures, and threats every single turn before you're ever allowed to make a move. Okay, takes, bishop b2. Well, you said you lost a piece. I think this doesn't lose a piece, does it? I think you're still somewhat okay. So now bishop takes f3, takes, okay. You shouldn't lose this, I don't think. I'm kind of curious to see how this game ended. Takes, okay. So material's equal, and we have opposite bishops. The d-pawn is very strong, and now you give tons of moves with no comments at all, so I guess I'll just go through this and see what happened. I guess if you don't think it's important, then maybe it's not. Okay. Okay, I'm not sure why g4. I feel like that just kind of weakens your position a bit, but I guess you want to create a passed pawn. Are you playing for a draw here? I feel like if you just do nothing, it's hard for black to do too much. But okay, let's see how this goes. Takes. Okay, well now it's just a dead draw. It's a complete 100% dead draw with the rooks off the board. It's just opposite bishops, right? How is black ever going to win this position? I don't see a way black could ever win. Although I don't really like being too active with the king. I would just kind of hang around this area. And black can't do anything. If you stray too far, you have to worry about the king coming in somehow. Although it's kind of hard to see how. King c4, you thought it was a draw, but you also thought you could create some chances. So again, what does that mean? Don't tell me create some chances. Tell me exactly what you want to do, because I don't see what you're going to do. Now you have to watch out for the king coming around. Okay, f5, takes. Oh, and you blunder. Oops. Yeah, ouch. And you said it was time trouble too, so you're probably playing too fast of a time control. Although this was a very long, complex game, so I can understand, even if you were playing, a longer time control, like 30 or 60 minutes, how you could end up in time trouble here. So don't feel too bad about it. I mean, this is just a one-move blunder in time trouble, so I get it. That happens. A very sad way to lose, but, it happens to everyone. I'm a lot more concerned about the general lack of calculation that you kind of showed throughout the whole game that really could have cost you a lot more if black capitalized on it. I think you really missed some good chances for yourself and for your opponent by just kind of playing on general principles, and that you're not really looking for all your candidate moves and your opponent's candidate moves every turn. So really try to work on that. But yeah, this is understandable. One move blunder in the end game should have been a draw. All right, that wraps up this Master Mentorship video. Again, if you have questions, comments, thoughts, please post them in the Facebook group. I'm going to be posting this video there as well as emailing it out to you. You can give comments in the Facebook group. You can ask questions. I'm always in there helping everyone out. And please keep sending me the games. I look forward to making another Master Mentorship video next week.